I am again affectionately known as Cephus Uncle Bobby X. The organization is, of course, Love Not Blood Campaign, www.lovenotbloodcampaign.org. And, a big shout out to Black Report TV.
We have Uncle Bobby. Some of you guys know him as Cephus X. He's the uncle of Oscar Grant, as you see him on the tie. Today you was at a police accountability panel, and we were talking about SB-1421. 1421. Can you tell the people a little bit about that and the significance of it?
Yes, I can. So, of course, last year, Senator Nancy Skinner co-authored a bill called SB-1421, which is a transparency legislation we wanted to get passed that spoke to the issues of what the history looked like of a police officer. So we battled all last year. We got that bill signed into law officially January 1st, 2019. Of course, when it came into law, policing agencies all over the state of California, not all, but some, began to shred that history. They started shredding, unbelievable. And then they filed a court order restraining us, putting a restraining order on that information so we couldn't get it. So now we're in court battling just to get this information. Just recently, about approximately 3 weeks ago, we finally won in court where they have to give up the information. And of course, 2 days ago, I was able to get my public records request, which was the investigation and the history of what happened to my nephew, Oscar Grant, by the murder of Johannes Mehserle, and of course Tony Peroni, and also information on Mehserle Dominici.
So what was new about the Oscar Grant case that you found out from those records?
So what was really troubling and painful was the fact that we argued in court about 4 incidents before the murder of Oscar Grant. 3 of them was before 2008, and Kenneth Carruthers was in 2008, where these young men, black, were beat up by Johannes Mehserle. He's 6'7", 270 pounds, so he was really trying to exert himself to show, I guess, his white supremacy self. And what ended up happening in that report, it revealed to me, unbeknown to us, that Mehserle in 2008 alone had 6 excessive force complaints filed against him, and then the murder of Oscar Grant. So that means that he had a total of 10 excessive use force complaints prior to the murder of Oscar Grant, and he was still working. Had that SB 1421 been in place back then before Oscar was murdered, Oscar would be living today. That officer wouldn't have been on the force if the agency, BART, would have took the corrective action to remove or reprimand an abuser of excessive force character. And that's what he was. And so that's one that was really stood out. But there's many others. One of the other ones was that we always said Tony Peroni lied. He was abusive and showed up. The report shares that Tony Peroni was the reason why Oscar got murdered, because he falsified the report. He lied to the interrogators. He called Oscar a bitch-ass nigga. You know what I'm saying? Everything
that was in their report.
This is in their report, the actual report. And, a lot of this stuff we already knew, but the community didn't know, and the world didn't know how aggressive and sick this character was. He was just fired. He frauded the state of California for unemployment benefits, but he was just fired. He was known as a abusive police officer, but he was just fired. For all we know today, he could be working in New York as a police officer with a gun on his side, beating up other people, innocent young men that is totally unaware of his history.
So you saying there's no way we can track him?
I mean, we have no tracking mechanism in place right today that will identify these trouble officers that quit their agency and then go back and get employed somewhere else. A good example would be Mehserle, who left New York, the 42nd precinct, I believe it was. I may be wrong, but if I remember correctly in the study, Mehserle had civil complaints filed against him. Well, he was in civil litigation for excessive use of force, but prior to that, he had civil complaints filed. He had complaints filed against him for excessive use of force. He left, he quit New York, the 42nd Police Department, came basically to California, started in, I think it was either Campbell or some city out in southern South Bay, then left there and came to Oakland. Within a year and a half, he kills Alan Bluford. This is an officer that had a egregious history in New York that we knew that, well, I'm sure Oakland Police Department knew about it. I'm going to put that on record. I believe that they did. And they still hired him, and then he murders Alan Bluford. And now we have another family, of course, in pain, troubled by this murder. And then the history reveals that he was a known trouble-minded, abusive person in New York.
So how will SB-1421 change that situation? Because I want to also ask, what's the point of us getting records if they're all redacted and we get a paper with all black lines through it?
Right. I can say the redaction that took place in our file did not take away any of the incident of what we've been stating, and the addition to is situation that we weren't aware of. So the redaction in our particular case was really just the names, maybe the address of certain witnesses, their location, and that was pretty much it. So it was clear cut. I'm not saying that all records would be like that, but in our case, it was readable. 1421, I believe, will hold an agency responsible because now we as a community can see these records, say, hey, if you have another character like this going forward, you have a responsibility to take action. Your failure to take action just really criminalize your agency, make you culpable in the fact that you allowed this person, this family to be murdered, or this family member to be murdered, and yet you knew about this officer and didn't do anything about it. But that's what the documents say.
So that's basically you making the state an accessory if this continues after this law.
Exactly. My new argument today is Tony Peroni should be in jail for murder. He lied. He perpetrated he created the chaos. He perpetrated harm on Oscar, and then of course Oscar get murdered. If you and I are involved in a robbery attempt and I kill somebody, I'm going to jail for first-degree murder, but you're going to jail also for first-degree murder as an accessory to it. You was there, you was a part of the scheme and things that happened, and then you just go home and I go to prison. That's not the way the law works. So Tony Peroni today should be arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to jail for being an accessory to the murder of Oscar Grant. There's no statute of limitation on murder. And so as far as I'm concerned, ultimately, we got to get a gun off their sides. They're still walking around here with guns on their side. And Tony Peroni should be in jail for murder.
And they should be prohibited from being in law enforcement.
And definitely never, ever again employed by a policing agency anywhere in the world.
Security or anything.
Anything, exactly. Right. Exactly.
Last thing, can you give us some of those stats that you had on the stage? You were giving the people some stats.
Sure. So anyone that wants to know can go to the Department of Justice Use of Force Data Collection. It's called Open Justice. Google Open Justice, Department of Justice, or Open Justice, California. And what you'll see is data collected on use of force that happens in the state of California. All the agencies in the state supposed to report their incidents to this database. But we're clear that not all agencies are doing it. But the agencies that has proven what we've been saying all these years, that excessive use of force is being applied to people of color, specifically black men. So, for example, the last two data collections that was revealed, 2017 to 2018, over 700-some-odd people experienced excessive use of force. Then they break it down to what type of use of force was used on them. Half of those, 350 to 370, had to do with officer-involved shootings, right? And then half of those were actually the ones that were actually shot. So we said every year, on an average, 150 to 170 people are killed by police shootings. Out of those actual shootings, there's a small percent that actually have a weapon in hand. Most of us are killed because of a cell phone, because I'm throwing my hands around, or because it looked like I got a weapon and the officer feared and he shoots me down. The sad part is that we know the data's true, and we know that AB 953, which is racial profiling, Identification Act that came into existence in 2016 helped us understand that if I was driving my vehicle, I had a bad tail light, officer pulls me over, what are my chances of surviving that stop? And what we're finding in the data is that we have a 50-50 chance of surviving that stop.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Black men.
Black men. Because we've been killed at 20%, 20 times more than what a white boy is killed at. You know, and so that's the reality that we face. Anytime we encounter a police officer, it could be a deadly situation, whether you get out of it alive or not. These are the stats and numbers you can look at for yourself. You can deduce, data mine it all, and put your stats together, and all you're going to do is say, damn, we got to do something real quick. Because I keep saying that if we fail to act now, right, then our babies and our grandbabies definitely is not going to have a chance. But we're also setting ourselves up to implode, because if what we think was bad in the 60s, you know, the long hot summers, you know, the riots that took place, all behind police brutality, what's it going to be like later when our babies grow up? This fearless generation, your generation, that's fearless, that don't mind throwing a brick through a window, that don't mind hitting a cop in the back of the head. I mean, those are the realities we face. And if people feel like you don't push us enough up against this wall, I can't do nothing but fight back. And that's where we're going if we don't do nothing now. We have to fix this problem. We got to take common sense legislation, put it in existence, and just pray that the culture begin to follow the legislation that's been put forth, be obedient to the new laws, and thereby culturally change themselves. Otherwise, you know, it's going to be a sad day.
Where could people get more information about your organization?
Yes, so more information about the Love Not Blood campaign, which is our primary organization, you can go www.lovenotblood.org. That's lovenotbloodcampaign.org. We're also co-founders of the national organization called Families United for Justice and California Families United for Justice. So if you Google FamiliesUnitedForJustice.org, you will see our national organization that entails families all across the United States. But specifically, our political movement centers around California's United for Justice here in the state that is pushing various legislation as well as other activities that center around building families back up and getting them involved and bringing about the real change that we need. And again, that's www.fu4j.org. Let me repeat that. It's www.fu4jnetwork.org. And that's the National Organization of Families United for Justice. And if you're a family member impacted, definitely reach out to the organization and be a part of our movement, our network. One of the biggest things that we have coming in 2019 is our conference, where we have families from all over the country and hopefully even from Europe actually coming to Las Vegas this year for a conference that centers around healing, centers around the various things that families experience when they experience this traumatic experience of losing a loved one, how to support each other, breaking bread with one another, and just having social fun and knowing that you're not alone.
Thank you, Uncle Bobby. Salute to you for your work.
Thank you, JR, for being around for quite some years and being involved. And we know you was there with the Oscar Grant movement, but you also been around with all the other movements too. So we thank you for, giving us a voice.
Right on, man.
Putting it out in the air so people can hear and learn what's really going on.
Appreciate you, man.
All right, thank you.
All right.